Joining me now is Erfan Kazemi. He's the president and CEO of Horizon Copper. Thanks for being with us, Erfan.
Great, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of Horizon Copper, let's go back and perhaps for those who are unfamiliar, you could give us the genesis of Horizon Copper, whereby Sandstorm Gold Royalties sold assets to unlock some value and hence created this company. What can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, it's an exciting one to tell, actually. Within Sandstorm's portfolio, there were these crown jewels, but they weren't your traditional precious metal stream. They were copper-based. And so Sandstorm vended these out and sold them to Horizon Copper, and hence Horizon Copper was born. And it's based on the premise of working together with Sandstorm to help acquire copper interests with large precious metal byproduct. In turn, Sandstorm can help finance those copper acquisitions by providing a stream of royalty, and Horizon can build out this portfolio of world-class assets and get diversification benefits and build a pretty unique portfolio. And so it's an interesting play, copper.
Well, let's get to those assets, starting with Antamina in Peru, which is the third largest copper mine in the world. And you say you're expecting at least 10 million in cash flow this year. So can you give us a brief overview of Antamina?
Yeah, happy to. Antamina is just one of three assets in Horizon's portfolio, all world-class. Everyone's familiar with Antamina. It's one of the top copper assets in the world. It's been producing for many years. Horizon Copper has a 1.66% royalty, NPI royalty on that asset. And so we expect to have average annual cash flows at 350 copper, about $10 million US. That's cash flow going to Horizon shareholders. But as you get increases in the copper price, it's torqued to that. And so, over the last number of years, that royalty has cash flowed quite a bit, and it's got a lot of leverage. So if you're looking at $6 copper prices, that royalty can cash flow over $20 million US to Horizon shareholders. So we're pretty excited about that.
And Horizon owns 30% of the Hot Maden project in Turkey, and SSR Mining is now the main operator. And Erfan, you said that's a significant milestone development. Tell us about that now, working with them.
Yeah, Hot Maden's an incredible asset. With Horizon, it's very unique to launch a company with three world-class first quartile assets. So Antamina we just chatted about, but Hot Maden is one that a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with, and that's because it was held 70% with a Turkish conglomerate, and they were moving it forward. But as Horizon, we've been big believers in the quality of this asset, how unique it is, the tremendous amount of grades, not only with respect to copper, but gold. And it was wonderful to see SSR Mining, this multi-billion-dollar successful international mining company, validate that position. So they've come in, they've taken 40% of the project. Ourselves, we own 30, and Lydia, the Turkish partner, retains 30% of it. And so over this last year, you've had tremendous steps. You've had key permits being issued with respect to the EIA and the forestry permit. You've had SSR Mining come in, and this is an incredible partnership because not only are they great mine operators, but they have in-country house expertise. So they helped build and produce one of the projects called Çöpler in Turkey, which is an incredible asset, but it's one where not only has SSR proven that they can build and operate a mine, not only on budget or under budget and on time, but they're taking that same development team that was so successful at Çöpler, and they're now moving it to Hot Maden. And so you've got all these re-rating things happening within our portfolio, and it's wonderful to see that Hot Maden is now getting a lot more public attention because you do have SSR Mining promoting and talking about it and indicating that they plan on bringing to commercial production in 2027.
And moving along to Oyu Tolgoi, the big copper mine in Mongolia, in which Horizon Copper owns a stake through its 25% position in Entrée Resources. We know that Rio Tinto is now doing underground work there. So Could you tell us and give us some of the highlights of that project?
Yeah, this is an asset that, when it's actually going to be hitting its full production, and by 2023 will be the fourth largest copper mine in the world. And so when you look at Horizon's portfolio, it has an NPI royalty on Antamina, which is the third largest copper mine on a copper equivalent basis. And we're really excited to have the Oyu Tolgoi asset in our portfolio, so the third and fourth largest copper mines. This is another asset that has had tremendous milestones over this last year. Rio Tinto has consolidated their interest with respect to the Oyu Tolgoi ground. We have, through our 25% ownership in Entrée, a finance carried interest on a portion of the Oyu Tolgoi ground, Hugo North Extension it's called. And for Horizon shareholders, that's pretty key because not only has Rio Tinto dropped 30 drawbells over this last year, but they've actually begun underground mining on Lift 1. And so our finance carried interest is on a panel on Lift 1. And so it's really exciting to not only see underground mining start happening, but also the significant improvements in capital that they've deployed. And when you look at Lift 1 and what the sustainable production is going to be, our interest on the Hugo North Extension is going to be part of that story. And so having the milestone of having a Rio actually announce that they had sustainable production during Q1 of this year is a big step for our asset.
Now, as far as the relationship with Sandstorm Gold Royalties, they own 34% of Horizon Copper. So you get the funding support, you get access to corporate development and technical teams as well. You've said that you're excited to add some new assets. So are there any updates in that area?
Yeah, thanks for touching on the Sandstorm relationship. We think it's critical. We think it's a huge feature to have a multi-billion-dollar company helping Horizon grow and help acquire assets by providing a low form cost of capital via a precious metal. And with copper, as most people know, it comes with precious metal. And so if you find copper projects, large precious metal byproduct, there's this kind of harmonious synergy that happens. And so what you have is, the largest corporate development team in the royalty space via Sandstorm and a tremendously large technical team scouring the planet, looking for these kind of passive interests where we can transact on, where Horizon can add another copper asset to its portfolio. And you get this incredible diversification that happens. This last year, we've got 3 world-class assets, one that's cash flowing in Antamina, Hot Modern, which now has a new operator in SSR Mining and has its key permits. And Horizon has, $40 million of working capital US to help fund its equity portion of the capex based on project financing that SSR is pursuing. And then our finance carried interest in Oyu Tolgoi. Those are assets that we were able to add into Horizon because of the unique relationship Sandstorm has in scouring the planet, looking at over 100 transactions in 1 year alone, and trying to put place markers on various assets and transactions. So it's a very competitive, unique advantage that Horizon shareholders have.
Now, you've described the model at Horizon Copper as quasi-royalty, i.e. sort of a hybrid between operators and royalty companies. And so can you describe that a little bit more, flesh that out, and compare and contrast the model with traditional royalty models?
Yeah, thank you. Well, when you look at our portfolio today, our largest asset is an NPI royalty in Antamina. And then the Oyu Tolgoi interest is a finance carried interest, so it acts very much like a royalty. And a Hot Modern, the all-in sustaining cost to produce an ounce of gold on that asset is about $550. So very consistent with your traditional stream in terms of costs and such. But I think the key thing that we noted, over the last couple of years is this gap in terms of copper stories out there, where if you're looking at a copper story below $2 billion in enterprise value, it's very hard to get diversification. You may have just, a company that's, $1 billion, just one asset. And so you don't have the diversification benefits that you would normally want to get in a portfolio. And so we found this unique positioning where we can acquire all these passive interests and build out this portfolio and build, something sustainable where, it doesn't take much effort to cash in a check from Antamina. And so our focus can be on acquiring more of these assets and building out and becoming an aggressive consolidator. And so as a shareholder in Horizon, you get these unique assets, you get a portfolio of them, and you get a lot of torque based on how we structured the enterprise value of the company. And so I think it's a very unique way to play the copper space, and certainly one that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Now, I'm sure there are a lot of investors rubbing their hands, waiting for Horizon Copper to be a public company, which is something that you have in the works. In terms of valuation, you figure when you go public, you probably have a valuation of maybe 50 million or so, an enterprise valuation of 220, but still at that, undervalued compared to peers. So can you, based on various metrics, so can you flesh that out and maybe elaborate on what you expect to be the valuation and where the market should be seeing the company?
Yeah, I'm a numbers guy. I've spent over a decade as CFO of a multi-billion-dollar company. And I believe that at the end of the day, you have to look at what are the returns for shareholders, especially in the form of free cash flow. And so when I look at the portfolio, I look at, what assets do you have in there? Are they cash flowing? So Antamina certainly is. And you look at what kind of leverage do you have to the commodity prices. And so, at $4 copper, you're looking at your portfolio when it's in full production over, $50-60 million US. And at $6 copper, you're close to $100 million on an annual basis in US cash flow on an annual basis. So that's tremendous amount of cash. But you also have to look at it in, what capital does the company have to deploy in order for their portfolio to mature? And so, when you've got copper stories out there, you got to well, do they have to do drilling? Do they have to, put capital in for doing a PFS or, a PEA or feasibility study or whatever that is? And in order to do that, you have to have access to capital. And most, these copper companies, they go raise equity in the capital markets, and shareholders get diluted over time as a result. What's unique about Horizon is it has a cash flowing asset. It has its 40 million of working capital was earmarked to the equity component of the CapEx build for Hot Maden based on SSR's public announcement that they plan on project financing it. And then the last asset is Oyu Tolgoi, which is the finance carried interest. So, technically, Horizon doesn't need to go raise equity capital to move its portfolio forward. So that's one thing to keep in context when you're valuing a company. But when you look at it, you look at the cash flows and you look at, okay, what is your enterprise value? What is the actual free cash flow coming? With a lot of copper companies, they have, operating cash flow of X amount. But what investors don't realize is just to keep that asset alive, just to make sure that mine doesn't actually shut down, a majority, if not all of that cash flow has to be put back into investing to keep that asset alive. And so when you look at the Antamina cash flows coming, that's actual cash flow to Horizon shareholders that doesn't have to be put back into that asset. And so you can look at it from a couple different ways. You can look at it, are we, a royalty company or a producing company? Either way you look at it, we trade at very attractive multiples where you could see, a re-rating that you trade closer to a lot of those peers. But I would say that when you look at it from a big picture, you say, what is the free cash flow coming to shareholders? And are you a company that has a portfolio that's declining, a value trap, i.e. that free cash flow is coming, but your assets are shrinking? With Horizon, you get not only that cash flow yield that you'd expect, but you've got all this growth built into the portfolio. And so it's truly exceptional and an outlier of not only this strong cash flow yield, but it has tremendous growth built into the portfolio. And so it makes it quite unique and quite appealing.
And just carrying that further, Erfan, you've said that you believe that there are multiple routes to a re-rating of the stock when it's public, assuming compound annual growth rates of anywhere from 30 to 100%. I believe the numbers you've said that stock could go anywhere to 200 to 2,000% higher. I mean, those are big numbers. So can you rationalize that for us?
Yeah, there's a lot of re-rating routes to go. Certainly, copper price is one of them. I think in the last year, People have been surprised to see the amount of news coming from one of our key development assets being Hot Maden, whether it's the key permits in place, whether it's SSR Mining coming in and now being an operator, and they step back and they look at your portfolio and they go, you've got Teck, Glencore, BHP, Rio Tinto, and now SSR Mining as the operators of your portfolio, which is quite unique. I think one of the things that you look at is what is your value proposition, especially from a torque perspective. And so not only do you have as Horizon this world-class portfolio of assets, we've talked about how it's cash flowing, the growth built into the profile, but the way it's been financed is through some IOUs, some friendly debt with Sandstorm. This is debt that was taken back in consideration for that earlier transfer of those assets within Sandstorm's portfolio. And the benefit of that is you get tremendous amount of torque. Now, based on my experience, you have to be very careful with leverage because, leverage can be dangerous. And in our situation, it's specifically structured that it's more equity and weighting. So there are no financial covenants. The interest yields are negative. A lot of that debt is non-interest bearing until, Hot Maden is actually in production. And Horizon has the ability to pay back that debt in shares at higher prices, subject to Sandstorm not owning more than 34% of the company, consolidating the results. So it really is a scenario where you've got this tremendous leverage and you've got this really supportive partner in Sandstorm to help move the project forward and help you acquire assets. The numbers that you quoted earlier in terms of, what are the returns, you can look at it and you can say, hey, if you just have the portfolio now today, which is, your largest asset being an MPI royalty, you've got these quasi royalties in place, what do other royalty-based metal companies trade at? And so when you look at that and you look at the last financing we did, there's a route where, that can increase when you get up to it to instead of 0.5 times to more to 10 or 11 times based on that pure portfolio. But you get this other double whammy effect if you go say, what if Horizon does no future transactions? What if, the largest corporate development team in the royalty space being Sandstorm finds no copper interest? Well, all that cash flow that the portfolio is producing will be used to pay off those IOUs. And let's say none of that debt gets converted to equity. And so what you have is more of your enterprise value accreting to your equity holders. So not only get the re-rating opportunities that I mentioned before, but more of that enterprise value that's financed through IOUs is accreting to equity holders over time. So that's the unique story within Horizon Copper.
Lastly, Erfan, we know that shares in Horizon Copper have been halted for a while now. When do you think they'll become available for trading again?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. We recently announced the financing. It's being closed in short order, and so we believe that we should be trading within the next month, so the first half of 2023.
All right, great stuff. Well, thank you very much for the insight into the assets and the valuation of the company and the model. Very interesting stuff, Erfan. We appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you for taking the time.
All right, Erfan Kazemi. He's the president and CEO at Horizon Copper.